Good morning. This is Alpha Awareness, tape number 5 in the Tape of the Month program, The Treasure House of Memories, prepared by Vero Minto, distributed by Alpha Awareness, the Tape Distribution Center, Post Office Box 8238, Spokane, Washington. This tape is designed to open that treasure house of memories, open the door of all the beauty and memories that enhance your life. This tape contains a light meditation toward the end of the tape into that world of beautiful experiences from the past. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the treasure house of memories. Every one of you, every single one of you, have everything you have thought, felt, seen, or done in here. Is that amazing? That make you shake up just a little bit? If you were standing on the street corner watching a circus parade go by and the horses come by clop, 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 and it was a warm day, and you were looking up at the horses' bellies. Do you know all of that's in there in time and space and dimension? You can go back and fire it how? Just as a little child, if you want, from that dimension, and you can hear the horses clopping down the street. You can feel a hot day. You can see the horse fly by, if it was there that day. It's all there in sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Now, don't make that mystic, because it's a very beautiful thing called what? It's called memory. Just memory. Now, the treasure house of memory is fantastic, and we can use it for many, many things. You see, we spend millions of dollars a year seeking pleasure, don't we? What do you buy popcorn for? Did you ever buy it for calories? No, you bought it for the crunch, didn't you? We spend millions of dollars a year seeking pleasure, and within our own brain-mind functioning is a treasure house of memories that's so fantastic that you can have pleasure from it every day of your life. Now, the problem with most people is when we go back into the treasure house of memories, what do we tend to go back and remember? The hang-ups? And people, for one hang-up, there's how many good things? 10,000 to 1. That's why that little success list we talked about could be so important to you. Write down 10 successes as a child and then add to them each day. And what will you build in your life? Success will breed success, because your treasure house of memories is a success mechanism, and there's tons and tons and tons of it in there. So we're going back into the treasure house of memories, and it's important to do so. If you have a nasty or a bad tape in there, so to speak, if you go back and review it from the adult perspective later, what could happen? You could change it. Now let's talk about hypnosis for a moment, and I'm not being facetious in any way about hypnosis, in no way. It's a very good discipline, but many times under hypnosis, let's say with an operator, you were taken back to relive your dog being run over when you were 6 years old, because that's a hang-up to you. Okay, you go back, and under true hypnosis, how would you relive it? The same way as you did that day. And usually you come back and don't know consciously what you've done. The operator then has to tell you what? This is what came out, and you've made another fresh brain cell pattern. Do you know that under any meditation discipline, or just sitting and remembering, you can go back and relive that same thing happening just exactly the same way as it happened that day, but you're reliving it from what dimension? An adult dimension 40 years later, correct? And still not good that the dog got run over, but it's totally different, isn't it? Because we know dogs have times to go. So it's not the hang-up as it was at that time. You see, in a few moments, we're going to take a balloon, and I promised you balloons. We're going to blow up a balloon, and holding it in our hand, we're going back to the first balloon you ever received in life. Now, how many of you can actually remember the first balloon you ever received in life? Most of you don't even have conscious memory of it, right? But it's all in there in sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. And then one lady in this exercise said, wow, I know what it is. I've never let my children have balloons. I've never let the grandchildren have balloons. I know why now. I know why. I went back, and she was in this exercise. She said, we went back to the first balloon I ever received. I was 3 years old. It was a big yellow balloon. My uncle handed it to me. My other uncle, I was loving it, had it in my face. The other uncle reached down and broke it with his cigarette in my face. And it snapped and did what? Now, what has she got a tape about balloons in her mind about? When she perceives balloons, what plays? Nasty snap, doesn't it? Not even aware of it. The survival mechanisms picked it up. Now, going back from the adult dimension and seeing this, what happened? She immediately said, "That's silly." She had a qualifying tape with the tape of snapping in the face. She said, "That's silly," and she could go back then, that evening, and buy balloons for her children and grandchildren for the first time in their life. You see what can happen here? So it's a treasure house of memories, and we're not going to talk about all of the negatives. It's the positive ones. When you begin to do this, you go back to the delicious, delicious memories. And they can become what we call a release. What is a release? Anybody? What's a release? How do you get rid of something? Okay, let it go, but what must you do to make a release? You can't have a vacuum. You have to put something in its place. You know how you get rid of one problem? Get a new one. And if the day you're all tied up and stewing, just simply stewing over a problem, what if you could release that for a few moments and go back to a childhood memory? And if that childhood memory held you for 30 minutes, what have you got? You got a total 30-minute release, haven't you? How many of you people ever went down through the lower field when you were growing up and turned over dry cow manure and caught the beetles? Anybody? 1, 2, 4, 5 friends right here. Wasn't it delicious? Don't you remember those days? Walking down through there with the bottle, and there was thousand-legged bugs, there was stink bugs, there was red-winged bugs, there was those ones that they said would sting you or make marks if they crawled over you. You had to watch out for those. You collected bugs all day, and then you went back and run Mother out of the kitchen. Don't you remember it? Delicious, delicious memory. Childhood memories begin to come back, and if you play these, fantastic things begin to happen in life, because I believe you can only go as far forward as you have been. You see, if you've never had a bridge in your mind, can you talk about bridges? No, you got to get a bridge first, right? If you've never turned over dry cow manure in your life, can you talk about it? No, but you all have now turned over dry cow manure, haven't you? Every one of you just had that experience. It doesn't have to be physical. It was non-physical, but you've all had that experience. And it can be a delicious dream. Don't you remember the first day that school was out, you threw the shoes away? Don't you remember? Barefoot? And there was those days you called 15-foot days and 30-foot days. A 15-foot day meant you could take 15 steps before the ground got too hot. You had to judge the shade spots. Don't you remember that? You'd run fast to get to the next shade spot, let your feet cool off again. Don't you remember putting your shoes back on when you went to school that fall? And how they hurt? You'd have rather gone barefoot to school, wouldn't you? Delicious memories. Remember the first grade of grammar school? How many people remember? People, you can go back and sit down in meditation and think of the first grade of grammar school and the teacher who was sitting there, and look around the schoolroom. Now, if you got any age at all, what did you see? Now, I'm keying it right now, correct? The treasure house of memories. What was in that schoolroom? Remember the blackboards? How big were the blackboards? Now think, how big were they? They were huge, weren't they? They went clear to the ceiling. Don't you remember them? And usually on 3 sides. What were those blackboards for? What were they for? To expose your ignorance. That's exactly. You always got called up to that blackboard when you didn't know the answer. If you knew the answer, go on to weeks. You'd study and prepare. Never got called up there. You got called up to that giant. Now think about it for just a moment. Doesn't it seem tall in your mind? You know, my mother, before she made the transformation, got one of those blackboards for each member of the family, the old slate blackboards out of the school, and they're hanging on the wall in our house. You know how tall they are? About 42 inches. And every time I walk by it, I'm amazed. You go back to relive this. You can remember sneaking through the fence at the old schoolyard and going out and eating your lunch on the lawn beside the creek where the sheep mowed it. And the schoolyard didn't have any grass. Weren't supposed to go outside of the schoolyard, but delicious. You could see the rose bush, the wild rose bush, with the robin's nest there. And your life begins to unfold. You begin to remember these things. Then you begin to share these treasure house of memories with your children and your grandchildren. When you have a reunion, what do you spend all your time doing? Telling all the old stories. Isn't it delicious? And you should, because if you share these people, that's your history and your heritage. You have a proud family when they get together and tell the tales on each other. We gather each year for Thanksgiving. It's not far away. And the kids call one night Whopper Night. And I guess that's right, because things get bigger and bigger as we go along. But it's delicious. We can hardly wait to get there for Thanksgiving so we can tell all of the tales on each other. And then the one thing, though, as we go into this treasure house of memories we have to be a little careful about is many times we will remember only those memories. Be with me. Only those memories of when we were a child and somebody else had all the rest of the responsibility. I have for weeks and months and months. I can go back to 3 months old. I can go back and see myself walking for the first time. I can see myself picking the raspberries, hoeing the corn crop, and I was tending to let all of my memories go from when I was born to when? To the day I married this lovely girl over here. Because the day I married that, what happened? I was responsible from that moment on. That's when the Vietnams and the Koreas and everything began to get in the way. You see, my dad had the responsibility first, right? And that ought to be a lesson within itself. You see, it didn't matter to us whether Dad had a lot of money or not, did it? It didn't really matter. Some of the days when the money wasn't there were the best days. Then when we get the responsibility, what do we begin to say? Oh my gosh, I found out that I was not reliving my family since the children were born. Since then, in the last several months, I've gone back and relived the birth of the first child. You can do it. It's there, sight, sound, dimension, and the whole works. That terrible way they look when you see them the first time. Did you ever go back and look at that? They're all purple like a prune. At least all of mine were that way. Don't kid yourself at all. Don't ask her. You ask me. I saw them. Okay, but a delicious memory. Then we come downward from that type of thing toward the children. Delicious memory. Good for me to have the kids with me this summer because they've made me do it. Carla, she ought to be up here. You know, she used to swing on these outside swing sets, and she couldn't get enough speed up, so one day she greased her hands with Crisco. And got on them. Got up on top and grabbed a hold so she'd go quicker, and she did. Clunk. One arm offset just about like this. It's like the time that Barbara, when Vince, the young man you see around here, was about 4 years old or 5, sent him down to the store for a quart of ice cream and a bottle of corn oil, a quart. And Carla, who was 3, went with him. And it was a hot summer day, and they were gone and gone and gone, and finally here comes Carla in, just all excited, Mommy, Mommy, come help Vince, come help Vince. And she couldn't figure why Vince needed to help with a quart of ice cream, and Carla had the corn oil. Well, she said, what's the problem? She said, he's got ice cream all over town, Mommy. Come help us. Come help us. She said, well, and so she went to see. He'd got 8 quarts. Isn't that delicious? And here was one just outside of the store. The load was too heavy. He left it there. It was melting. Here was another melting all the way up the street. And all the town people were following the ice cream pattern right up to the way. And here was Vince sitting up on the corner crying because he couldn't pack the ice cream. Delicious memory, right? People, if you're thinking of that, can you be sad? That's the release. If you think of that before you go into a business conference, what have you got? That's the release. It's a treasure house of memories, and you can go into these at the nth degree. We will. We'll play a beautiful piece of music this evening called the Blue Danube, and each one of you will just simply go back, and I'll give you some keys, and you'll begin keying back into your treasure house of memories, opening up some of those beautiful, beautiful doors. Then if you happen to hit on a negative, circle with me now, you can do something about that. You see, as soon as you see the old tape from 40 years later, it's not so bad, is it? This is like the lady who blew up the balloon in Boise, Idaho, and in the exercise she began to get the giggles. And she actually giggled, she laughed out loud. To the point other people opened their eyes to see what was going on. When the exercise was finished, I said, what were you laughing about? She said, let me tell you. If I could have had this exercise of blowing up a balloon and going back to the first balloon I ever received, when I got married, I'd have been a different mother to 3 boys and probably a little different wife to the husband. Not that it was bad, but it would have been a little different. She said, you know, I went back to the vivid realization of my first balloon. I was 13 years old. I was a naive young lady and very well developed for 13. A circus came to town, and my folks told me I could go down and watch the circus. So she said I went down excited, and it was one of those kind. It was more fun to watch set up than it was to watch the circus. The elephants pulled them in, helped raise the tent and all of this. And she spent a delicious day watching the circus being set up. About dark, she knew she needed to get home. She was leaving the grounds, but she saw the snake charmer's tent. And she thought, I'd better go over there and see if there's snakes in there yet. So she walked in. It was a little gloomy. There was no snakes in there, but hanging from the ceiling was a big, long, squiggly balloon, multicolored. Evidently, she'd never had a balloon, and she made up her mind she had to have that balloon. She had to have that balloon to take it home. She asked the man in the tent, what would this balloon cost? He said, oh, dearie, if you'll come back after dark, nothing. This is where she began to grin. She got all excited and thrilled the man was going to give her a balloon if she'd come back after dark. She thought anybody that naive ought to learn a lesson right then. She went home excited. She didn't tell her parents. She slipped out of the house after dark and went back to get the balloon. And this is later, 40 years later, 50 years later, what's she doing? She's watching this. That day, was it funny? But what is it now? Looking from the adult perspective, it's totally funny what this young lady was doing. She went back to the tent excited. She went in, and the balloon was up there, and it was dark. And she said, "I'm here for my balloon." He said, "Step over here in the corner, dearie." She stepped over in the corner, and within each one of us is a thing called a survival mechanism that will fire with no knowledge to get you out of a situation. Just as he reached out to grab her, the mechanism fired, and she screamed and ran. Now, what she had remembered as an adult was this. What she'd always remembered all her life is that man chased her out of that tent, across the circus grounds, all the way home, clutching at her. She ran in the house, slammed the door in his face, went into her room and cried all weekend, refused to go to the circus, and had never been to a circus in her life. You see, any time the children of circus came to town, Mother got what? She got ill. She couldn't go. There was always a reason she could not go, but what was causing it? The old tape within the mind. You see what I mean? The old tape fired. Circus came to town was perception, and that's went in and associated with everything she knew about circuses, and what was it? A nasty situation with a man. The reason she got the giggles was this. She said she saw herself in clear light how it happened. She walked in. The man did reach out for her. She screamed and ran and grabbed the center pole of the tent, pulling it out, and he ran into it with his head and knocked himself out, and the tent came down on top of him. He didn't chase her home at all. You see, when she altered that tape, now what could she do? I got a letter from her since, and she said, "Thank you, Verl. I've been to my first circus." You see what can happen here? It's the old tapes within the mind. It's like Verl. I could not stand long hair on anyone. You ask Vince. Vince and I had some good wrestling matches while he got his hair cut younger. Could not stand. And if you had long hair, people sitting in this audience 5 years ago, it would not have been good for me. Wouldn't have been good for our relationship. You know, I went back and was reliving the first day of grammar school, and I know why I didn't like long hair, and now it doesn't matter. Wear it any distance you want, clear to your knees. I just don't care. I found out why. You see, I was the third in a family of 6 boys. What was I supposed to be? A girl. That's exactly right. And they did their best. My hair was absolutely towhead blonde. Towhead. And they did it. You see, I went back. I hadn't known this for years. Mom never told me. She didn't dare tell me. I went back and relived the first day of grammar school, and here came Verl walking down the street in a pair of white with lace on the bottom of his pants, hooked together in the middle between your legs so they look like a dress. What do they call them things? I don't know what they called them then. It looked like a dress I was wearing, and I had long Shirley Temple curls, this long. I had more fights the first day of grammar school. I've never fought since. I got her all out in one day. The first week, really. It was about a week later, and I went through this. I can remember fighting with Marion Slinkard. He said, "Look at that cute little girl." Bam! Wasn't cute after I'd come home all dirty. Mother ought to got the message. About the 4th night, I'm walking home, and here is Mrs. Woodruff's behind the old swinging wooden gate. And she said, "Oh, here comes that cute little thing that ought to be a girl." Bam! I began to sob and cry. She said, "Your hair is so beautiful, you should have been a girl." I said, "I want dangerous hair." And I began to sob and cry, and I was crying so dramatically when I got home I couldn't speak. Mother looked to see if I'd been hit by a car or run over by a dog or something. Nothing wrong with me. Finally got back, and she said, "What is it, Verl?" I said, "It's my hair. I want dangerous hair." I went upstairs and got Dad's sheep shears, and I made it dangerous that night. There's only one little piece that wasn't dangerous that I couldn't get to, right over on this side. I went to school bald-headed the next day, but a boy. But you see, any time I saw long hair, what tape played? Anybody know Tom Sicking in Vancouver, Canada? Tom had the same thing. You know how Tom keeps his hair? You'll see Tom now be able to wear his hair just a little longer. Because he had the same situation, being the last boy in the family, and he was dressed like a girl and these type of things. So the old tape is in there. We bring it out of the treasure house of memories and begin to change it. So we're going to take this balloon this evening, and we're going to blow it up and go back to the first balloon we ever received. First balloon. Now and sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell will all be there. First balloon you ever received, and you'll be amazed at how this dimension then comes through. Some of you may go back to 3 years old. Now, if you don't get a balloon experience, what? Just go ahead and get any experience. Be aware of how tall you were, what kind of clothes you wore. One woman had button shoes on. What kind of hair? Are there any words written around? One lady got the balloon when she was in the cradle or in the baby buggy, and she said, gosh, it was this big. Was it helium-filled? Did it break? If your first balloon broke when you were 3 years old, what did you probably do? You probably sobbed and cried. That was a bad day, wasn't it? Really a bad day. But if you look at it from now, what are you going to do? You're going to laugh. So we're going to go back to the first balloon we ever received, and most of you will remember something you haven't thought of since the day it happened. Most of you will remember something you have not thought of since the day it happened. Now, if some of you all of a sudden say, now, Verl, my childhood was so nasty, I'm not going back into it. Bourgeois. It's an ill wind that blows no good. You see, our house burned down when we were 5 and 6 years old, Merrill and I, and there were 6 brothers and a sister. Now, was that a good day that day? No, but I can look back at it now, and you know what? It's one of the funniest stories I can tell. When Thanksgiving, what will be my first request? Tell us, Uncle Verl, how the house burned down. Let me share it with you. I was 5, Merrill was 6, and we had a job each night, which was called to go up and get the milk cows. We had to go out of the barnyard up through Raider Lane, and it was about a 2-hour job to go up and round up 12 or 14 head of milk cows and bring them back down so they could be milked each night. And I thought that was work then, but you know, it was a whole world. We went barefoot. We had to judge the shade spot to the shade spot so that our feet wouldn't get too hot. We crossed a creek each night called Raider Creek, where the rocks were sharp against the soles of your feet. But you wanted to stay in the creek because the ground was going to be hot on the other side. Look back and see your wet tracks coming out. We looked for jackrabbits. We chased the cicadas or the locust bugs. You ever do that? Those kind that hum, and if you just pop one twig, they'll quit. You can't find them. They told us there was a special snake up in the brush. It was called a blue racer. They said it would grab its tail and roll after you. Oh, how many nights we went up through the brush looking for those rolling snakes. Never saw one. We kept the brush between us so it couldn't get a way to roll to us. Then we go on up through the brush, get the milk cows, and bring them down. This night when we left the barnyard, we looked up at the window, and there was smoke coming out of the window, big column of smoke. Now, we did not get in any way disturbed. Why? How come we didn't get excited? Why wouldn't we be excited with a great big bunch of smoke coming out of a 2-story window? Because we had no information about houses burning down, right? Now I begin to giggle or laugh right here. It doesn't seem that you could live in an old 2-story house with the pipes that come up through the floor and gas lights for 5 years and not somebody tell you they could burn down. My children at this point begin to really giggle because they think they're saved. If Dad was that dumb, cancel smart, at that age, then maybe there's hope for them. We went out of the barnyard. We thought the chimney was leaking. We talked about it. We said the chimney's leaking. Must have been a big chimney. We went ahead and got the milk cows and chased our cicada bugs and the rabbits and waded in the creek and talked about fishing and brought the cows down. Coming down the lane now, we look and boy, the chimney's really leaking. Smoke and fire is coming out of the upstairs window 30 feet. At least 30 feet. We still don't get excited. Now my kids are sure they're saved. If Dad saw the house burning down and didn't know it was burning down, there's some hope for everybody around here. We walked on in, put the cows in the barn, and went into the house and beat on the back screen door, and Mother came to the door and we said, Mother, what's all that smoke and fire coming out of the upstairs window? She knew about it. She knew about fire. She went right straight in the air and screamed, the house is burning down, the house is burning down, go tell Mr. Grove. Okay, now it gets more delicious. I ran over to turn in the alarm. The only alarm we had was to tell Granddad Grove, your neighbor, that the house was burning down. He jumped in his car and ran around the neighborhood honking the horn, hollering, Minnow's house is on fire, Minnow's house is on fire, and they rang the church bell. I came back, and remember we said this week that your self-confidence is the intimate conversation you hold with yourself, and the strength of any muscle in the body is in direct proportion to your confidence in which you use it. I went in the front room, and Mother said, can you take the baby out? Now, he's in a big wicker basket, and I said, yeah, I can take him out. I grabbed him up, run out and put him on the first step. He was out. Came back in and Mother says, can you boys get the organ out? Merrill and I were there. Now we're 5 and 6 and that old cherrywood organ probably weighed 180 to 200 pounds. Our intimate conversation with ourselves was what? Yeah, we can do it. We picked it up and took it outside. The only problem, as soon as we got it outside, we had it over top of the baby. I hollered, Mother, come here. Mother, come here. She said, don't bother me. I said, Mother. She came. She said, I told you to take that baby outside. I said, he is outside. She said, don't argue with me. She balanced the organ. I picked the baby up, set him down another step, pulled the organ over him again. 3 steps, 3 pulls of the organ. We got the organ and the baby out on the lawn. Now, people began to arrive, and they said, stay out of the way, kids, and let the people do the job. 6 boys and a girl. Now I go around the end of the house, and I hadn't thought of this for years. The delicious, delicious memory. Everybody on those old ranches, we did what? We worked all summer to can the fruit so you could live all winter. You could have a winter season. And everybody had a root or a fruit cellar. And people, our teacher was down there, Mr. Monroe was there, McManus was down there, taking the jars off with this hand, putting them in this hand, tossing to a person at the foot of the stairs. He was catching in one hand, transferring, tossing up the stairs. A chain of people were tossing the fruit and the jellies out of there. 2,400 jars of fruit gathered on the front yard. None were broke. One was broke. Isn't that delicious memory? It's got to be good. Now, here's 6 boys and a girl around at the back porch, and the only place left to get anything out of this house is the back porch, is the kitchen. And in that kitchen, people, was a cookie jar that was that big around. I know, I remember it. It was yellow with a green flower on it. It was the kind that always had cookies in it if you could get to the bottom of the darn thing. You might get your shoulders caught getting in it. But it was that big. It was that big. And you know, nobody was getting the cookie jar. Everybody was packing everything out of that kitchen, and nobody's getting my cookie jar. Can you see 6 boys and a girl out in the flower garden sort of chanting, somebody get the cookie jar? Don't forget the cookie jar. It's over there in the corner. They brought out the meat saw. Who cares about a meat saw? Somebody get the cookie jar. They brought out the hams and bacons. Who wants hams and bacon? The cookie jar, somebody. The cookie jar. All of a sudden, Dick Scott come out the back door with a big cookie jar. He walked over right in front of us, threw it in the air, and it came down on a pile of rocks and broke. Fantastic, because you know why? All my life, I'll always have a cookie jar this big. Nobody can take it away from me. I'll always have a cookie jar 3 foot across. Why? Because it broke that day. Because if it hadn't broke, and I'd seen it 10 years later, how big was it probably? About like any old cookie jar, right? But people, I got a cookie jar that big that I can use the rest of my life. That night we stayed with Gertie Grove, and I even liked the name. Merrill and I had more abundance than we'd ever had in our life. I had a sheepskin coat that somebody gave me with the sheepskin to the outside, the wool. Sit there and rub it on your face. People, we played with electric train that night. We'd never seen one of those except in Montgomery Ward's store window or in the catalog. We played with one. We played with a little steam engine that evening that you'd put stuff in and water, and it would light it and it would whistle. It'd turn a wheel. You could saw with it. We had shoes. We had boots. We had pajamas. We had pajamas. We had the kind that had feet in them and a hood. Felt like you ought to have ears and a tail, too. All our life we'd slept in what we call long johns with the trapdoors, right? People, we had abundance running out our ears as we laid there and cuddled up in bed, and Gertie hollered up and said, boys, it's been a tough day, but you got to go to sleep. Merrill turned over and said, Verl, you know what? We ought to burn that house down every 6 months. Isn't it absolutely delicious? You see, now the day that it happened, was there anything good? No, all I saw was what? The terror in it. So any tape you have within your mind, if you go back and look at it from the adult perspective, what can happen? If you look at yourself when your first balloon broke, that day it was nasty. What is it today? Funny. So as we go back with the first balloon into this treasure house of memories, I want all of you to be aware of where you are, what time of day, the hot, the cold, and so on. Now, many of you will remember somebody you haven't thought of since the day it happened. One lady in England who had came from England to Vancouver had got her first balloon from her grandparents when she was about 3.5 years old. At 4, she'd moved to Canada, to Vancouver. She had never seen her grandparents since, physically. She went back and fired the first balloon impression. Who was she looking up into the face of? Her grandparents. And it becomes a beautiful, beautiful memory. It's that simple. Now, if you happen to lock onto a negative, what do? You say, no, thank you, and go on and change it. That's all you've got to do. There's no problem there. Now, for this exercise, if you don't have a balloon, at this time, continue with the tape. But for the next time you replay the tape, get you a balloon so you can actually experience the exercise that we're going to go through in just a moment, of blowing up a balloon and actually going back to the first balloon we ever received. Blow up a balloon and tie it off. Now, when you're blowing this balloon up, think of the last time you blew up a balloon. And just blow the balloon up, tie it off, not too tight. We don't want it tight enough that it'll break. And have some fun with it. Best part of the evening's right now. So blow up the balloon and watch your affirmations before you start, will you? Be careful what you say about blowing up balloons. I don't want to have to blow them all up for you. Okay, blow up a balloon, tie it off as soon as you get it, and then we will go back into the treasure house of memories. Okay, we will now, in a moment, go back to the treasure house of memories, and the way we will do this, listen to me, circle with me, we will simply close our eyes, not yet, but in a moment, and put our fingers together several times, take a deep breath, go into the subjective level of awareness, and just simply drift back to the first balloon we ever received. And many of you will go back to see how old you were, what kind of a day it was, look what kind of a haircut you had, who was there, what kind of clothes you were wearing. We will only take a few moments to do this, just a few moments to do it. And if you really want to do it, someday you spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes on one thing, and as soon as you get locked onto something, what happens? It opens and the whole story, time and dimension, folds out of the mind. It's all in there. But all we want to do is to prove it actually is there and it's happening in this exercise. Now, right now, so we can be aware of the 5 physical senses, I want all of you lightly, please, not for my teeth, rub it, just touch it lightly to the palm of your hand and be aware, totally aware of that sensation of touch. Now to the back of the hand. And feel there's a total different sensation, absolutely totally different, isn't there? The forearm has one sensation of touch. The back of the arm has a total different sensation of touch. The forehead has a different sensation of touch. Bring it from the forehead to the tip of your nose, and there's a total different sensation. Back again to the forehead. Do you feel the difference? Every single part of your body feels in a different way. It really does. Smell the balloon. Taste the balloon. Already have, right? Yuck. All right, then as we get into the subjective level of awareness, we'll redo these because you will find that your senses are much more in tune. How many people this week have been aware of your wristwatch ticking? Just tick, tick, tick right out loud? I was in a car one time in Las Vegas sitting after a class. We'd done a lot of meditating, and I started looking around to see where the clock in the car was because it was going tick, 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 tick. It wasn't that. It was my silent wristwatch. Your senses will come in tune sometimes that great as we begin to play with them. So we go back to the first balloon we ever, and I'll guide you in this, the first balloon you ever received. Was it a sunny day? Was it helium-filled? Did it float off into the sky? Was it a country fair? And the main thing I want you to be aware of is the dimension. If you got it when you were 3 years old and it was a birthday party, how big's the cake going to be? You need to be aware of this because it'll make you a better mother, a better father, a better grandparent if you're aware of the dimension your children see in. I can take you down to any supermarket here tomorrow, and we can go in there, and we won't only stay but about 40 minutes, and I can show you a mother or a father dragging a 2 or 3 year old boy or girl across the parking lot, taking big steps, he trying to keep up, swat him on the bottom a couple of times, takes him into the store, the toy store. What does the children see in the toy store? What's he see? He sees all where all the bubble gum is. Under all the shelves. He sees up on your miniskirt and he's not interested. Just doesn't make any difference. What's the cash register look like to him? It's that big. People pick them up once in a while and let them see from the adult perspective. This papoose carrier the younger people are using is not a bad idea. Letting them get up. If you really want to communicate with a child, what must you do? You must get to their level. Very soon they're not going to build any more platforms like you see me lecturing from this evening. Up here I'm talking down. You've been talked down to all your life, haven't you? One of these days they're going to seat you above me and I can speak up to you. I'm thrilled about the youth room that they have in Spokane, Washington. They put the teacher in a sunken place and the children sit up at eye level with her. And they're learning, people. They're learning. Be aware of this. One man said he got his balloon at a circus. He had no fun at all because all he saw was pants, legs, and hubcaps on cars. He said just a whole sea of them. Can you imagine? Now, if you go back into childhood, you'll be aware of this. So be aware of how big the balloon is, how far up on the string it seems, how old you were. And we're going to have some delicious memories with this. So let's do it at this point. Good, comfortable position. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Exhale slowly and put your fingers together a couple of times. Take another deep breath. And while exhaling, press your fingers together several more times. And take another deep breath. Exhale slowly and relax like a rag doll. You are now in the subjective level of awareness. Let us pick up the balloon now and touch it lightly to the palm of the hand and be aware of that sensation of touch. And then to the back of the hand. Be totally aware of how that sensation is enhanced. To the forehead. Smell the balloon. And now holding the balloon in your hand to your forehead, however you would want to, being aware that one could break, and if it does, it will not startle you. Go back to the first balloon you ever received. The first balloon you ever received, just simply let your mind wander back. Was it at a circus or a country fair? How old were you? What kind of clothes were you wearing? Was it helium-filled? Did it float on a string? Was it on a stick? Let your mind go back to the first balloon you ever received, a warm day or a cool day. Were there any noises? Were there any smells? Can you smell anything? How old were you? What kind of clothes did you wear? How big were the things around you? Did your balloon break? How was your hair combed? What kind of clothes? Don't let it startle you if one breaks, because they could. Being aware that one could break will then simply allow us to have it happen without a heavy sensation to the system. And now let us program that total awareness of that treasure house of memories, and any time we want to release, and any time we want to share with our family, any time we want that memory of successes, the successes that were so important, that we can go back through the childhood memories. Remembering these memories, using it for a total release, but also for the history and the heritage. And we'll share that history and that heritage with the children and the grandchildren, making them proud of the family. And we go back to those successes of the first day that we drove the car, and the first day that we walked on the stilts, and that day you conquered the bicycle, the day you jumped out of the barn window and made the somersault before you hit the hay. Those successes then become the beauty and become the very thing that we launch forward on as we look at the successes we've had in life. So with the total awareness of the treasure house of memories, let's stretch up very slowly now, putting our hands over our head. Stretching up slowly, hands over your head, eyes open, wide awake, feeling fine and in perfect health. Now let us take just a moment to see what some of the memories were that came from the balloon. Be totally aware. Were you aware of the dimension? How tall were you? Was it a hot or a cold day? Who did you see? Did some of you see someone that you haven't seen from the day this happening actually took place? How many of you had a memory that you haven't remembered from the day that it happened? You see, that's what we want to know. If we can go back into the treasure house of memories and pick up the first time, for example, I can key back in memory and pick up the time that I walked, probably about, 11, 12 months, I'm not sure when you're supposed to walk, very, very early, seeing my mother saying, "Come toward me, you can do it, Burl, you can do it," falling down, but the great elation when I actually made those 2 little running steps and jumped into her arms. We can go back and open that whole treasure house of memories, and if we would just take time to remember those successes in life, the first day you walked, the first time you rode that bicycle, just remember those successes, then we could build success upon success in life today. Would not be hung up on the negatives, but the successes that we can go forward to or forward with in our life. Now, as you remember this treasure house of memories, was it a helium-filled balloon? Did it float off into the sky? Did it break? If it broke, perhaps you saw a little child who was crying there. But as you look back, from the adult perspective, you perhaps smiled or laughed at this situation. Were you aware of how big the birthday cake was? Were you aware of how tall the refrigerator? Were you aware of how tall Dad was? Go back to 4 years old and look up at the hand of the man who put his hand down to lead you across the street or into the barnyard. That becomes the delicious memory Now you need much more time than we took in this exercise. Someday sit down with a balloon or anything that'll key you to the past. Take 30 minutes to let your mind unravel those beautiful, beautiful memories. Let's talk about a word that balloons bring to me right now called abundance. Abundance. You know that too much abundance can be poverty? Too much of a good thing is what? It becomes poverty. Balloons. Your children who are, if they're under 10, will never have a balloon the way you had a balloon. Why? What are balloons for today? They're water balloons to blow up and break because they've got so many. When you got your first balloon, what'd you do? Don't you remember tying it to the ceiling and the air finally went out of it and you had to blow it up again? And when it broke, what'd you do with it? You made the little ones and squeaked them on your teeth and run mother out of the kitchen, didn't you? You know, there's kids today don't know you can squeak them on your teeth. As soon as one balloon's gone, they do what? They get another balloon. So too much abundance. It's like candy, people. Don't you remember the old Walnettos? Don't you remember the Walnettos wrapped in the separate pieces of wax paper in a cardboard carton, 10 for a nickel? How long could you make a package of those last? A long time. Don't you remember eating them with the paper on so they'd last longer? Yes. They're back on the market, people. You can get them again. They don't have the walnut in them. They got artificial flavor, but they're back. How about the old Jawbreakers? 2 for a penny. Don't you remember? Oh, remember that. Every time you found a penny, you headed for the store to get your Jawbreakers, and your buddy was psychic. Now, if you had to haul in the wood, he didn't know you were doing it. There's no psychic there. But, boy, the moment you found a penny, who was at the store door when you come out? Your buddy. He wanted your other Jawbreaker, didn't he? And you made up excuses all the way downtown what you would tell him so he couldn't have it. The first thing you made up your mind, telling you that you didn't have any. But here you have it sticking out in your jaw like this. It shows. He says, well, I only got one. That's all they give me today. They didn't have any more. He said, what's that in your pants pocket sticking out there? Another big... You said, well, my mother says she wants it. Anything. You couldn't convince him that it was so. You finally said, no, you can't have it. Because the new part of them was the best, wasn't it? When you first put them in your mouth, when it was best. So, no, you can't have it. Well, he said, then you let me use yours for a while. Don't you remember that? Walking home, and you finally said, okay, you can use mine a while. So you walked slow for this block, and you agreed to let him have it for half a block. And you walked very slow, and you sucked fast to get all the good off of it. Then you popped it out of your mouth, gave it to him, and you walked fast, and he walked slow. Don't you remember that? And you were fearful there wouldn't be any left in that half block because you just come meandering down there. Then, don't you remember taking it out and saving it for another day? Bubble gum. Bubble gum. Your children will never have bubble gum the way you had it. Why? What do they do with their bubble gum today? The moment that the sweetness is out of it, they do what? They throw it away or swallow it. What'd you do with yours? On the bedpost overnight. That song was real. And after the sweetness was gone out of it, what'd you do with it? You dipped it in the sugar bowl, don't you remember? Mother said, don't put your old germs in the sugar bowl. You didn't care. Your germs weren't bad. You dumped it in there, and every time her back was turned, you sweetened it up, didn't you? And then she caught you every time. And you didn't know why she caught you. You know why? You left a trail of sugar 7 feet across the table as you run by. You see, that's real bubble gum. It's like turkey, people. Your family, unless you have made it a very special thing, will never taste turkey the way you tasted it. Because when you had turkey was when? Thanksgiving and Christmas. Thanksgiving and Christmas. And when did you start to taste that turkey? About July. Don't you remember that? About July, you begin to taste the turkey. Okay, Thanksgiving Day came and the turkey was baked. It was put on the table. Don't you remember that? Don't you remember the torture chambers they had? They baked the pies 3 days ahead and said, don't touch. And you had to walk by the custard pies and the lemon pies and the banana pies all sitting in the window. That was a torture chamber there. And don't you remember the other one on Thanksgiving Day? At 9 o'clock in the morning, they set out a great big tray of cheese and pickles and all of this stuff and says, don't touch. What'd you do all day? You worked every trick in the world getting Mother out of the kitchen so you could snitch some of that. I know today it was for that. It was for that. Then the turkey was baked. And you sat down at the dinner and you ate till you hurt deliciously. Can't you remember how successful the hurt was? Just delicious hurt. Mother said, you can't eat anymore. You said, you want to bet?
And you went out and ran around the house 3 times, jumped up and down, jogged it down, didn't you? Come in and ate a whole bunch more. Now she says, you're so full you can't eat any pie. You want to bet? Had 1 slice of each, right? Then you really did get deliciously hurting. She said, you can't eat any more, and you slipped a piece of custard up to bed with you. Don't you remember? And you wonder how she found out about that. If you'd looked at your sheets, it was all over them, or you tried to hide it. Thanksgiving Day's over. What do you have the next day? Turkey leftovers. What do you have the next day? Turkey hash, then turkey soup, and then waited for what? People, that's turkey. That's turkey. You see, in our family, we've had turkey now, and anybody who has a budget to follow and eats protein, even yet, you should be using turkey 3 or 4 times a month because it's the best meat buy there is. And several years ago, it was what, 29 and 30 cents a pound? So on our table, at least 3 or 4 times a month, we had turkey. And that was good. Nothing wrong with that. That was very good. But the point is, my children will never taste turkey the way we tasted it. My wife went back to visit her mother several years ago, and the children prepared the turkey dinner. It was a beautiful turkey dinner, the cranberry sauce, some with the shells on and some with the shells off, the potatoes, the gravy, the pumpkin pie, all was there. And the big golden brown turkey. And as we sat down and said the grace before dinner, I looked at the children and I said, what does Thanksgiving mean to you? One of my daughters quickly explained that it meant Plymouth Rock and the Indian Fathers and giving and receiving, which is correct. The other daughter looked around the kitchen a little wild-eyed and said, really what it means, Dad, the kitchen's a heck of a mess. We got a lot of dishes to do. But you see, they'll never taste turkey because we've had turkey 3 to 4 times a month, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is good. I don't know how important it is, but we need to go back and share these memories with the children and with the grandchildren so they can be proud of the heritage of the family. You see, I could have given them a 2.5-pound McDonald's hamburger that day. They'd have remembered that Thanksgiving long after they remembered the Thanksgiving that we had the golden brown turkey. So we begin to be aware not to be so abundant that we're poverty-stricken. Don't go too far the other way. Not to the point that we create a poverty complex within the mind. But when you buy candy, only buy enough that you can taste that candy, that it lasts. 1 pair of shoes, every new necktie should be new and exciting. Every shirt should be a thrill. Every pair of tennis shoes. You see, if there's 30 pair of tennis shoes, what do they mean? If there's 40 dresses in the closet, what do they mean? So what's the word abundance as we go into this abundant world? Because go to the grocery store, people, and they want you to buy an extra 2 bars of candy. You can get 2, or you get 12 in a package. 12 in a package if you will pay 3 or 4 cents more. You see, it's like 1 balloon. Go out tomorrow and try to buy 1 balloon. You can't even find 1 balloon. You got to buy 30. You take them home, and they'll blow up and break. So don't overbe. Don't overdo. Don't overhave. It's important to get the very most out of our life as we go forward. And now let's take just a moment to go back into the treasure house of memories with a meditation, and let's just key back. I will give you certain keys, and we will just take a few moments because you really need to take 30 or 40 minutes on each one to let the whole memory unravel. But with light background music, sit down in a chair now, lay down on the sofa, relax, lean back, take a deep breath, exhale very slowly, and mentally repeat the word relax several times. Take another deep breath, and while exhaling, mentally repeat the word I am several times. And now another deep breath, and as you exhale, mentally repeat the word within. Relax, I am within. Now feel that relaxation moving slowly down through the forehead, the eyelids, through the face, the jaw muscles, the lips, the tongue, down through the neck, out into the shoulders, relaxing on out into the arms, down into the elbows, down into the very fingertips. Feel your fingernails relax. Take another deep breath now and exhale slowly and relax the chest and the abdominal area. Allow that relaxation to move slowly on down through into the hips, into the knees, the calves, the legs, the ankles, and the toes. It's a very beautiful feeling to be so deeply relaxed. And in this relaxed state, with the music as the background, let us go back into the treasure house of memories. Let your mind wander. Let it key to any memory that comes forth. As we talk first about cinnamon. Cinnamon. What does cinnamon mean to you? Cinnamon's a happy spice. Don't you remember the first cinnamon toast Mother used to make for you? And then the time that she left and said you can make your own cinnamon toast, and if a little cinnamon was good, a lot was better. And that taste you had on that day. Don't you remember the baked apples with the core hollowed out and the cinnamon and the honey in the center? How about the Mother's Day of baking pies? You never got to eat that pie for 2 or 3 days. It had to cool out well before you could eat it. But remember the little bit of pie dough that was left over, and you got to roll that out. We called them mason jar pies. We took the rubber off of the mason jar lid, and you rolled it out and made it hard, or you put a little piece of apple or cinnamon and sugar in it, folded it over, and when that came out of the oven, you got to eat that right now with a cool glass of milk. What other memories does cinnamon key for you for just a moment? Applesauce. Be totally aware right now. Are you thinking of Mother or Grandmother and the old wooden stove? Are you thinking of something you haven't thought of since the day that you first had that experience? And as your memories of cinnamon keep keying for you, let us talk about another subject, rain. Think of rain for just a moment. What does rain mean to you? Where does it key you? Does it key you back to a happy experience? To a time when you got caught in the downpour as a teenager or younger? The warm rain? Let me share with you my experience of rain. I have very vivid memories of rain. When I was a child and growing up on the ranch, my dad always said, make hay while the sun shines, and we surely did. Anytime the sun shone, we worked and worked and worked. The moment it rained, we got to go in the barn, listen to the rain beat on the roof, hear the horses munching on the hay. We got to go fishing. We got to go in and build a fire in the fireplace. And so you see, to me, even to this day, when I hear rain, it's a beautiful feeling of relaxation. What does rain mean to you? Let me share a few more of my memories with you, just to key perhaps memories for you, and then we'll take a couple of more memories, and a little time to let them make appearances within your memory system. How about making cider in the fall? When all the apples came off the trees, you just didn't make a few gallons, you made 50 gallons. And remember the delicious taste of that cider? And they said, don't drink too much, and you always did, and you had the results of it. How about homemade ice cream? Where does that key you? The old hand-cranked freezer. Who was helping crank it that day? Did you put enough salt in the snow around the ice cream freezer so it didn't take all day to freeze it? And remember taking off the lid and licking the dasher? Perhaps even the fight that you had with your brother or your sister over who got the dasher each time. But as you look back from the adult perspective, isn't that a delicious memory? How about your first day of grammar school? Someday go back and see the teachers sitting in the chairs. See those blackboards 42 feet tall. The one that you always got called to when you didn't know the answer. What was the plumbing at the school? Don't you remember his and hers? The outhouses set out way in the back of the school with well-worn paths? Remember the church bell? Perhaps even remember the day that you rang that bell, turned loose of the rope, and the bell turned over 3 times and you wound up the rope? You see, as we begin to use these type of things, we can key back into memories that are fantastic. How about just simply thinking about the first time you whistled? Can you remember the first time that you actually successfully whistled? Maybe through the lips first. And how about the time that you whistled through your teeth? Remember walking home from school and trying to do it time after time, and how thrilled you were the first time the whistle came forth. Someday sit down and take time just to remember a spring, how you feel in the spring when the first leaves on the trees begin to bud forth. It seems like a whole new world there. And then take time to remember a summer, your special summer, the one that was best for you. In that fall, when the leaves turned those glorious colors, and the rains began to come, the year's work was finished. You could turn within to rest and relax and have a winter season. And then the winter season. Can you hear the wind as it howled around the trees and you were secure in the house? That great feeling of a job well done as you experienced the winter season. Be aware as you go into this treasure house of memories that you can key all types of memories, and you key them on all the dimensions of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. As you continue to do this, you can build a group of memories that can be very instrumental and very beneficial on what you do today. We have a tendency when we go back into the childhood memories or into the memories of the past to weed out sometimes and look at the negatives. Bypass that right on over the top and make yourself a list of those beautiful, successful memories that you've had in life. Another one I can share with you is the time I beat the billy goat across the barnyard. I made it for the first time. He didn't knock me down. The time I picked my first gallon of raspberries. If you're a fisherman, how about the first time you caught a fish? Feel that joy, that excitement as you ran up the path to show it to Mom and Dad or the uncle and the aunt. How about the first limited fish? The first horse you ever rode? Beautiful, beautiful memories. Successful memories that we can open with awareness. The first Easter egg hunt that you ever were on. Can you remember the dress you wore? How many eggs you collected? If you're from a ranch background, can you remember cutting the hay and the smell of that new-mown alfalfa hay and then putting it in the barn with the old Jackson fork? Can you remember the name of the first dog that you had as a child? And the first kitten? Do you remember how you loved that animal? Your first horse? Anything will key you back into the childhood memories and the memories of the past. Simply let them unfold. Use them as tools to build your future. Take a piece of paper and write down each of these memories that you unfold of the treasure house of memories. They become a success list for you. And that's a physical assignment to actually, after having a session of memories, take a time to write that story. Perhaps you have a best-selling book. Perhaps you have the history and the heritage of your family that you'd like to give, maybe not to the world, but just to your family and to your friends. And first and foremost, to the most important person in the world, and that is you. Because as you go back and take your successes from start to finish, from day one till right now, and remember all of them, success breeds success, beauty breeds beauty, happiness breeds happiness. Take some time to rediscover the past. We only go as far forward as we've been in the past. And at this time, just slowly stretch up now, opening your eyes. A good stretch. Take a deep breath and exhale. Wide awake, feeling fine and in perfect health.